topic for today is religion versus spirituality.
Yeah.
And I think there's been a lot of confusion in contemporary times where people conflate the two.
Yeah.
Everyone is trying to be spiritual, and I feel like I've seen that my whole life through the New Age movement, but I guess it dates back, I'll say, to the age of Aquarius, which happened in the 70s before we were born. But
yeah, even though the age of Aquarius is a 500-year long shift.
Yeah,
that
and the shift began.
Well, I mean, the shift began depending on how you want to say it began. There's no official line. So it's between...
a shift.
Yeah, it's like between now and 100 years from now.
Right.
Or 100 years ago. I mean, the song's nice, though.
It is.
You know, it really gets in touch with the inner spirit there.
Absolutely.
I think the song should be the official starting point.
Yeah. When we look back historically, the Age of Aquarius song.
Yeah. Age of Aquarius. You know, I don't want any copyright issues, but yeah. I think that should be the point when it not just recorded, but actually published officially and or maybe even broadcast, you know, when people could listen to it for the first time.
It makes sense. Because it's going to be an arbitrary date, right?
Absolutely.
That seems like the perfect one.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a big problem with spirituality. Like you were mentioning that they get conflated or people are like, well, you know, they're just different things in the sense that you have to do yoga and meditate to be spiritual and to be religious. You know, it isn't about that. Where, you know, these are false differences. And I think real spirituality is really just finding a deeper meaning in the things that you do, that goes beyond the mundane, beyond just the basic science of it. Not that science is anti-spiritual necessarily.
Spiritual people might claim that. But...
Absolutely. Well, and it's come to that point. I think it's really sad that it's come to that point. And it really hurts people's spirituality today. And I'll always be on the book saying that I personally believe that a healthy spiritual understanding of life is going to be important for a lot of people. I'm not going to go ahead and say everybody. It very well might be. I don't know. But I do know that a lot of people...
There's a lot of people.
Absolutely. And we run the gamut. You know, like you've got people that don't want to put on their pants without deeper meaning and something to drive them. And other people never think twice about that stuff. They're so systematic about their life. You know, you get a job because you do this. You know, I want to have kids, and then I want the kids to grow up. And somehow they do it without ever thinking, it seems, about like the meaning of life or what it means to die at the end. And I'm amazed by it. I love it. I don't understand it at all. I can't relate.
We've been questioning things the whole time.
Absolutely. So. You know, and I have a deep-seated desire to find meaning in some of the stuff I do, which I think is what led me in the more religious route. Also, the fact that I wanted to be able to share my spirituality with other people. And I think that's also an important distinction, is that spirituality can be amazingly unique and personal, while religion by default tends to fit certain guidelines so that it's something that can be experienced by groups of people. Not that spirituality can't be, but oftentimes the truth is you can find a mystic that's lived in a cave for 20 years by himself. And this did happen. Historically, there was a cave that somebody found, and it was decorated for a specific river goddess that pretty much nobody would know the name. But this hermit lived there, and his whole life.
Greek?
Yeah, he was a Greek. I think probably out in the countryside, out in Pan country. But his whole life was just dedicated to being a hermit in a cave, dedicated to this river spirit, who wouldn't have been any kind of major god that anybody would have ever talked about. Mm-hmm. I think that's very spiritual. But as far as sticking it in an organized or any kind of religious sense is harder to do. I mean, the truth is, mystics that live in caves are hard to talk to. It's hard to share. I think they do find insights. But I also think that...
Absolutely, but...
Yeah.
If they never share those insights...
Well, and they
like that hermit in particular, it seems like nobody met him in life.
Certainly.
It was almost like discovering the Paleolithic cave paintings.
Basically, right?
Like there's something, there's a message there. They're beautiful, they're spiritual. You can maybe feel it.
He's the equivalent of like that hardcore nerd that's been writing his fantasy book for like 30 years, and he's developed his own language and his own world, and he talks about it all the time, or she does. I have a good friend, and actually she fits this perfectly, but I'm not trying to make fun of her in any way. Talk for hours of these stories from that world. But considering they never actually wrote the book, and nobody else knows it, they end up being stories of basically nonsense that no normal person can follow in any meaningful way, because there's no context, right? And that's...
I mean, I was developing a world like that for much of like my teenage years. Like, I always had thought of, staging a novel there, but the enjoyment for me really was like building a world. And it might have been before our friendship, but when in middle school we played some role-playing games, and
I remember.
And I would create stories from that world. So a few of my middle school friends got to experience this world that only otherwise existed in my head.
Yeah.
I found a map of that actually the
other
day. It integrated stuff from the mud that we used to play, as well as the stories that I wrote, and so I understand that, and like there was detail there, and there was also like areas where I'd named something and I was like going to return to it, and I was going to build the culture for this other country. And anyway, that's a tangent, but
absolutely, but it gets a point across, and that mystics who go off on spirituality by themselves find amazing things, and they move forward in their spiritual practice. But the difference is they can't talk to anybody about it. They have trouble sharing any of these ideas that they've journeyed deep into themselves and brought back, because they're not speaking the same language as anybody else. Nobody has any context for what they're saying. And I think that that's what religion does in some ways, is creates context. It creates language. Or as I always say, it's like learning music theory and being able to share a song with somebody. Like, if we don't both know the same Western music theory, if you come from a Carnatic background in India, I'm going to have no ability to write a song down and you to play it.
Yes.
And religion is trying to organize spirituality in such a way that it can be shared with other people. But the truth is, I don't think there's, even in music, like the way that we write music in the Western world is not the best way. It's not the most efficient way. There's other ways to do it. Hardcore music theory nerds have come up with other ways. They don't catch on because nobody else knows it.
Yeah.
You could learn that your whole life and talk about how great. We could definitely
create new and better ways.
Absolutely. But if they don't catch on, or if the way that exists kind of does the job, it's unlikely that we'll do that. Now, and I think religion is a lot like that. There's never going to be one religion, like one size fits all. And that becomes problematic, because part of the tenet of several religions is someday everybody alive is going to have to follow this together.
Yeah, or else.
Well, and so you're left saying, well, some people, no matter how hard we try, just won't catch on. So then that alive part becomes very important. And sometimes you have people that want to change people from being alive to not alive because they don't follow their religious beliefs. which is silly and just nonsensical in a lot of ways. I mean, I guess it makes a certain kind of insane sense, but
it's hard because it would make sense if you believed deeply at your core that it made sense that either you save someone by bringing them into the fold, or you save them by
stopping them from holding back progress or something. I don't know.
It is, I mean, religion can be a dangerous thing. Like, no one can argue with that. And I guess that's why we want to explore this.
Absolutely.
But I was thinking, we jumped right in. This is an interesting topic, but I feel like we might want to step back and like define what is spirituality, what is religion, and maybe even what is mysticism. Because
absolutely, not a lot of people come from that background.
Because they're all, like we said in the beginning, people conflate them, but they are related. At one point in my life, I probably would have said that I'm spiritual but not religious. And there are plenty of people who are religious, not spiritual. They follow the letter of the law.
Absolutely.
They attend the church or temple. They follow the religious rules, but they don't. To me, I would say, I mean, I didn't look this up, so I don't know if a dictionary definition would necessarily help, but to me, spirituality is feeling that oneness, that biophilia, that connection with the world. And I think it's possible to achieve to have spiritual practice without religion, and it's one of the things we're sort of trying to develop. But it's religion also can make it so simple to achieve that spiritual progress.
It definitely can.
But what is spiritual, or what does religion do differently than spirituality? I would ask.
And I would say, in my opinion, and again, this is just off the cuff, because if we go to Oxford English Dictionary or something, it's going to give us a particular definition of religion from a Western culture. And I'm hoping this will be a little broader, but encompass more, to match people coming from all kinds of backgrounds. Because if you live in some Pacific Island tribe, whatever the Oxford English Dictionary says may not apply. But I would say that, personally, I think religion attempts to codify a belief system, a spiritual belief system, almost exclusively. I would say there's some bizarre exceptions to that. The Unitarian Universalists specifically really aren't trying to codify a spiritual belief system, but a belief system still. Although I'm not sure that it's spiritual necessarily, or all aspects of it are necessarily spiritual. Some parts probably definitely are.
Right, in the Unitarian, and also to be differentiated from classical Unitarianism, which is more of a Christian doctrine, but a liberal one. But Unitarian Universalist it's almost like a pan-religious movement.
Certainly. And I think very humanist.
The few events I've attended, it's like, maybe we'll talk about Buddhism today. Maybe we'll talk about Islam. Maybe we'll have a Christian sermon, or we'll do a meditation. And it is very interesting because I feel like, and I admit, I had some experience with Unitarians when I was younger, but never joined, and it's been years. But they seem to be very community focused, like community first, spirituality and religion second. So they welcome everyone into the fold. It's very admirable.
Yeah, the Reverend Bickle, I think his name is, up here in Bellingham. He does a good job, and I've talked to him and been at some events that he's done or ones that we both spoke at. Great man. I love hearing the Unitarian take on spirituality in general, or interfaith stuff. I think they're really strong on, as you would expect. I mean, they spend most of their time educating themselves on other spiritual practices and spiritual beliefs, trying, I think, to find the wisdom in each one. But yeah, I think that's the number one thing, because not all religions have deities in them. Not all religions are something that holds any recognition to any other religion, particularly. You know, like if you're a
They're
Taoist
sort
or
of religious
something.
isolates.
Yeah. If you're a Taoist, like if you were raised Catholic or something, you would have a hard time recognizing some of the things that they do as being spiritual, or I've noticed this in some comparative studies classes I've taken on religion, or even just basic Eastern religion classes, where you try and come up with a handful of, well, what are the core things you want to know about each religion? And even then, in small parts of the world, you find ones that are just so off the cuff they don't fit. It's hard to tell if they even think about, like, what happens when you die, for instance. So it's pretty interesting. But I think codifying a spiritual belief system is pretty key, because the only way a religion works is if there's more than one follower.
Right. Yeah. Your spiritual practice it's your own.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's what, you know, for me, it's what I've cobbled together with some yoga. I'm starting to explore the Tantra. There's a little pagan. There's a little bit of Christianity, and it's sort of like things that resonated with me. Mm-hmm. But if I were to write that down and organize it and create a pamphlet that someone else could read and be like, oh, I'm going to follow Shane's philosophy, then it's starting on the path toward religion.
Absolutely. When it's just you in your apartment, it's going to be hard to go get religious status.
People have tried, but
sure.
I feel like there's also you might move from spirituality to a cult to a religion.
Absolutely.
And cult has a lot of negative connotations, because modern cults tend to be very, I don't know, centered on some charismatic guru.
But the Kool-Aid comes out sometimes, and it only needs to come out a few times to be like, don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
You know?
And doomsday cults are frightening.
Sure.
And a lot of these they turn into sex cults. And it's unfortunate, because a cult is really a group of spiritual practitioners, maybe with a leader, maybe not, who are getting together and, you know, figuring out what this practice means, you know, how building it from a spiritual practice into something with a legacy. And in my humble opinion, a religion is just a successful cult. A cult that expanded and has lasting power.
Yeah, especially if you're going by, you know, a more academic definition. I think that's right on. If you're going by like a mainstream, what's a cult and what isn't, definitely there's groups out there that are, you know, they have categories for this, behaviors to look out for. If your leader is telling you not to contact your family, if they're not in the cult, you know, you're probably in a cult.
Right.
And little things like that.
If it's isolating yourself. And that's that cult of personality. And I feel like, you know, and there likely is a clear delineation between just a cult being like an experimental religion and a cult of personality, or a sex cult, or a doomsday cult.
But in academia, you know, when they're talking about people that worship, say, the goddess Isis in Rome, like in the, you know, the golden ass or something, right? That was the cult of Isis. And just meaning a group of religious practitioners with a codified belief system focused around the goddess Isis. Maybe they had leaders, maybe they didn't, maybe they had a council, you know. Most likely there was some governing body, but I think that's not probably necessary. But certainly, if we're to use the term loosely and not try and bring too many negative connotations in there, you know, in Heaven's Gate, which is certainly weird. I mean,
no hail Bob.
Yeah, I've never looked at Nikes the same way, you know, ever since I was a kid and followed that on the news. And I generally believe people should be okay to do what they want, but yeah, obviously then this stuff like that happens and you're like, well, no, I guess we can't make a blanket statement about that anymore.
Nope.
But certainly, you know, and these things don't always start out as doomsday cults. Maybe they start out as groups of friends, and then they turn into a sex cult, and then they turn into a doomsday cult, you know, because the leader gets cancer and wants everybody to go with him.
Who knows?
Yeah.
The
And we
false
also brought up
messiahs.
mysticism, too. And
Right.
that's a fun one. And something that gets thrown around a lot, but can apply different ways in different situations. And I think in this one, I want to point out, although a lot of people probably know this, not everybody does, that most major religions have a mystical practice
Right.
that exists within
There is
them.
a strain of mysticism.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, and in throwing out a definition, the mysticism for a religion is sort of like the R&D.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's where people are bringing their, the spirituality and the changes over time. If a religion is
Absolutely.
1,000, 2,000 years old, I mean, I see, Catholicism has been more successful than a lot of Protestant religions in adapting, which is strange because like they're the oldest, they're the stodgy one.
Well,
Protestantism broke away.
Well, early on, the Catholics stamped out a lot of mystical practices and mystics in the religion. One of my favorites of all time kind of comes from the early days of the Catholic religion, Origen. And some of his writings were just amazing. And I wouldn't call him a Gnostic, but it was
But
during
the
that
Gnostics
same
were
period.
like Christian mystics.
Yeah, in a
to bring
strange
that
way.
up.
But definitely, there were a mystical tradition that existed inside Christianity. A very weird one. I mean, like, you try to explain it to people, and it's just like, this is a different thing, isn't it? Calling God the demiurge and talking about the goddess Sophia who gave birth to him, and I mean, very particular belief system.
Kind of heretical in some circles.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, they got stomped out pretty good. And what exists, you can't always trust because, again, the winners often write history. And so although oddly enough, when we found like the Nag Hammadi codexes or something about Gnostics, they kind of verified what the people that were fighting against Gnosticism actually said. It's like, no, I guess they really did believe that. Everybody just thought that guy was a jerk. But no, it's right here in writing. But I think there was a lot of Greek thought at that point. And so what we consider Christianity today was still being codified by things like mystics. And one person's heretic is another person's mystic. And
right.
Yeah, those were the guys, men and women that went inside of themselves and looked for answers and tried to apply those answers outside to everything.
But they were believers, of the religion. They didn't. The Gnostics they're not actually the best example because
no, but
they were divergent.
So how about like Sufis?
Sufis are much better. They never denied Islam. They were bad, like labeled as heretical, and
sure.
they've struggled because they're not a new branch of Islam. They're not comparable to Sunni and Shia,
and they're not trying to pull people in necessarily and proselytize and stuff the way a religion does.
Mm-hmm. They were it'll come to me. Subversive.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Because they embraced movement and dance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is pretty uncommon in both major strains of Islam.
And Christianity and, any branch of Judaism, really.
Right. Abrahamic religions, dance isn't a big part of it.
No, and in fact, it's frowned on most of the time.
And Sufism, like the dervishes, it's not like they're just boogieing.
No. Yeah,
it's
certainly.
a very particular dance with very particular steps, and it is a form of worship.
And it is spiritual. Meaning it goes beyond the mundane, incorporating religious elements, sure, but more importantly, deeper aspects that are meant to mimic something greater than the mundane. For other Hebrew religions, like we'll talk about the Kabbalah, I'm sure, all the time, at least here and there.
Of course,
And that's a mystical tradition.
That's the mystical tradition that first comes into my mind when I hear mystical tradition.
Absolutely. And there's a reason, because there's Christian Kabbalists, there's Jewish Kabbalists, and if you're not one of those two, you can be a Hermetic Kabbalist, and pretty much independent of religion, if we're to be honest. I mean, you can come from any kind of background and be a Hermetic Kabbalist. So you've got three people practicing a mystical tradition from different religious backgrounds, or maybe, I hesitate to say, no religious background, you know.
Well, beyond my sort of quick definition of it being the R&D of a religion, like mysticism is sort of like trying to understand the fundamentals of the universe. You know, like the tree of life is it's supposed to be the way the universe functions, the way the universe thinks, and how things are created. And the tradition is like, and we've seen this as we've started to explore with Tantra as well. They're going beyond the Brahmin religion to explore like what created the gods. You know, what's the divine source of creation? How does creation function beyond the conscious level? Like, you know, God is, you know, it's not really embraced by Christianity, but it's embraced by me. Like, God is the conscious level, the conscious vibration of creation. You know, we have this divine light, whatever it is, the unity, and then like if there's a God that is a separate being that is, you know, maybe it is like Zeus on his throne with a thunderbolt. That's clearly, like, at least at a level of understanding, that is
below
a metaphor for beyond the divine creation. And even the Greeks looked at it like that. It's like,
yeah. And a lot of religions, you know, they will start with primordial powers that aren't really gods you can get to know, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of
they're not a thing that is even remotely one that makes sense. And you see this going all the way back. Mesopotamia, for instance, you had the highest god. People didn't worship him because he barely saw people. He didn't know anything about him. It wasn't even. And then you get into
but his son was like the supreme sky god.
Absolutely. The ones below. I mean, even in Egypt, you know, like, people might have worshipped Ra a lot, but really it was like Horus and the children of Ra that really took the forefront of worship. Because it was just seen. Absolutely. And if we think about it in a three-dimensional kind of way, where you've got a god in space. So say you're Greek and you've got Old Night, or you've got Ra who's carrying the sun through the far-off sky, or Anu, or El, if we want to get all Canaanite. Like, you've got these deities that are so far away and so unrelatable that it doesn't do a lot of good to reach out to them. And they really exist as metaphors to explain how the deities that you pray to or that you personify are the ones that were born out of something unknowable. And people that really explore that unknowableness, I always see as mystics. And I think in Dion Fortune's book on Kabbalah, the mystical Kabbalah, she does it a little differently. So she says that she wouldn't see a Kabbalist as a mystic, but she would see somebody like I started with, that living in a cave is a mystic. Somebody that like really looks inside themselves or focuses on one specific thing. And she always thought that the two worked hand in hand, in the sense that she would see mystics as people who like reach into the dark and pull up secrets and understandings that they virtually are unable to explain to anyone else. While people like Kabbalists are more like spiritual scientists that are working piece by piece and trying to be able to show their work at the end of the day, so to speak.
Right.
And say, this is how I got here.
So they develop a tree of life.
Absolutely.
with specific pathways.
But I still at the end of the day, would always call a Kabbalist being part of a mystical tradition. Because I think that still is mysticism in the sense that you're trying to reach beyond deity in some way, even. You know, and I think that that's by definition makes it a little more than a basic religion. But again, you know, we could look these up and we could say them, but I'm not sure how much real utility that would be, because they're still coming from a particular viewpoint, or just they'll be otherwise they're so broad that they can apply to almost any religion, even if it's mystical, and vice versa. And what we really want to do is explore how we're going to use these terms going forward. We'll revisit some of this, but the truth is...
But spirituality, mysticism, and religion are core terms for this integrated path, whatever it is that we're exploring.
Yeah, that's...
And if you're trying to create this everyday sacred philosophy where, you know, you get up and you have your morning practice, you have your daily ablutions and your meditations, that's a spiritual practice, but it might not be tied to your religion. You might not, you know, pray to God as you brush your teeth, but you might make that experience where you're in there, you know, brushing your teeth and shaving, and make that so it's part of your awareness.
Certainly.
Not just this unconscious routine.
And I would say it's definitely okay to combine it with religion. And we'll probably give examples from our own, you know, religious practices. Like, I'm a priest. I'm gonna talk about paganism sometimes. But my hope is that people, if they have a religion that's important to them, can tie it themselves to their religion, if that's what they want to do. That they can make that bridge and find a way for it to fit in their framework of belief and their thoughts about deity and so on. But also, just like, the best way I can say it is just like it's always good to do good things for the people in your life. That includes doing something nice once in a while for you, you know, because you're a person in your life. And I think when it comes to your spiritual practice, it shouldn't all just be for whatever god or gods that you have. Some of it should be for yourself, to spend time honoring yourself as a person and acknowledging the things that you've done, that you're proud of, that anybody should be proud of. Hopefully, I don't know. There's all kinds of people.
Maybe that's part of what divides spirituality and religion. You know, religion is maybe more that worship and that gratitude for creation, however you define it, that miracle that created this world and that brought you into life. And spirituality might include that, but it also is like the self-care, like you said. Like, you know, when I do my morning, my daily rites and my meditation, and when I sit in silence and just tune out for a minute, that's not me worshiping. That's me grounding and me taking a moment for myself that is not, you know, not for my work and not for anyone else in my life, that is trying to build that fulfillment. And that makes my religious practice, it improves it, because, you know, when I am giving gratitude to the universe, or when I am involved in a ritual, like a group ritual, if I'm grounded and if I'm taking care of myself and if I have that spiritual balance, I will be more involved. I won't be worrying about my anxieties that come up. I won't be thinking about what it is I need to do tomorrow or the bills that I have to pay, because I've taken the time in my own life to ensure that I'm, you know, crossing my T's and dotting my I's and paying my bills, but also that I'm grounded and that I'm not caught in my head. Because personally, like, I love to get caught in my head. It takes a lot of work.
Oh,
to
absolutely.
not get caught in my head.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy if you don't take that time. I feel like we're in a cycle of like looking towards the future so often. And, now I'm getting near 40 and stuff in age. And at some point years ago, it dawned on me. I keep thinking about the future as if it's a thing, that has a clear goal. But really, the future's happened over and over again. You always think your life will start later when you're done with school or then when you're really in your career or when you own your own property and you're developing it and maybe you have a commune on there. I don't know.
Yeah.
But when you keep just looking forward, you forget like, oh wait, like no, actually I am living the future that the version of the future that I thought of 10 years ago, I'm in right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I always imagined enjoying myself then. But
Yes.
I'm still thinking about enjoying my future.
Oh, and that's such a trap.
Absolutely.
Especially for our like modern American mind. And
Oh, it shocked me. I was
I
like,
can talk about it all day, but I'm gonna go tomorrow and I'm gonna be thinking about the future.
absolutely. Yeah.
Especially with the auspicious nature of this day.
Well, and not to get dark, but I think that's one of the things that if you live your whole life like that, and then all of a sudden you find out you're going to die, or you might die, it just slaps you in the face. You're like, oh, but what about the future? Like,
I'm still waiting for the future.
yeah, I've got to. I can't enjoy myself yet. I've got to get to the future, and now the future's not coming. I didn't enjoy myself, even though you did enjoy yourself. You loved your life. You just didn't pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't take time to appreciate that you were liking your life in the moment, and that sitting on the couch with your cat is a pretty good evening. I mean, it feels good.
It ain't bad.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying my little glass of whiskey.
exactly. And I think spirituality does that too. Where and you were touching on this absolutely. Like it slows you down, and that's not even religion, right? I mean, that's a spiritual practice of slowing down the moment and being present in the moment.
Presence is so difficult.
Yeah. And it seems kind of ethereal because it's like, well, of course we're always present in the moment. But
Yeah,
again,
we
we're
can't be anywhere else.
But I think everybody knows what we're talking about when we talk about thinking about the future as this amorphous time. Like it's going to come, but when it does come, you're still looking at the future, you don't even know it. It creeps up on you. And I think spirituality is one of the only things that can bring you back and remind you to appreciate the now. And
I think, presence is a major part of spirituality because it doesn't matter what religion you are in, you belong to, and this is why, we want to develop this everyday sacred, this spiritual practice that is, we will acknowledge our religion because we want to acknowledge our biases, but that daily practice to keep yourself present would benefit just about anyone. Actually, it would benefit anyone. Even I would go out on a limb and say that.
Yeah, there's no one it's not going to benefit in some way. Right. If you can listen at all, if you can think, if you're not in just a coma or something, or an unborn baby, in some way. So, I mean, why don't we put some of the cards on the table here as much as we can and talk about what we do hope that this thing we want to do.
This ongoing experiment.
Absolutely. I mean, and we're trying to be the pioneers and explore it ourselves. And hopefully we'll get some listeners that want to give it a try. I mean, I would say right away, what I'm just hoping for is that we can come up with a spiritual practice that'll give people benefits, regardless of their religion, as you said. Or even if you, in the middle of your life, you change religion, or maybe you become an atheist or something.
Right. And that can be devastating. It's generally happens earlier in life, but it can happen later. I've had a number of friends who were raised heavily religious, they didn't question anything, and then sometime in their teen years or their early adult life, they lost their religion.
Yeah.
And like it's hard because I was essentially raised agnostic, to be perfectly honest.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we got religious around the holidays.
But I think that's becoming more common. Certainly,
It is.
more people are being raised agnostic, and
Mm-hmm.
but that has its own problems, right? So if you're from a religious background, the bottom of the world can drop out. It's terrible.
Exactly.
If you're raised agnostic, though, you're never. I've met a lot of people that were just never sure what their spirituality was based on. You know, like it never
Right.
had a
You can
foundation
drift
to
from the
begin
beginning.
with. Yeah. And so and I think that can be an issue too, because
But if whether you lose your religion because you have this realization that, I don't know, your religion has lied to you.
sure,
Your priests can be abusive, or they're
Yeah.
or they're taking advantage. They're building
or my
personal
mother
fortune.
said I'd go blind if I touched myself, and I did, and it didn't happen.
Yeah,
and now
that was the first question.
Yeah, I really like touching myself, or maybe I like boys, and I was always raised to think I was going to go to hell and die if I
That's
was a boy and I sought out boys.
so important.
So maybe you grew to a point where you couldn't identify with your religion, you know?
Mm-hmm. And if you lose that religious practice, that going to church, praying,
I think having
whatever
a strong
that is, if you have a spiritual foundation, if you know that if you meditate every day, if you eat certain foods to keep your energies up, if you do certain workouts and you bring a spirituality to it, then if you question your fundamental beliefs about the nature of God and the universe, you will still remain grounded and present. And you may decide to become an atheist. There's plenty of spiritual atheists. It's an interesting
Mhm.
thing. Or you may discover another religion. You may marry into a religion.
Mhm.
It's very common. And this foundation, and I want to think of it as like a practical spirituality, where if you are religious, it's reciprocal. You know that this divine presence comes from God, or comes from the Buddha, or comes from whatever you believe. And if you're not, it doesn't matter. But if you have that, if you have Jesus in your life and you have a daily spiritual practice, then part of that daily spiritual practice will be expressing gratitude to Jesus and to the God that you worship once a week in church.
Absolutely.
And you might include prayer as part of your spiritual practice, which is, I was, I've always been a little critical because I wasn't in the fold of Christianity, but I feel like just prayer isn't quite enough.
Sure.
I think it's a wonderful practice, and I think more people, even outside of Christianity, would benefit from some form of that concentrated. It feels like a focused meditation.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sure we'll do that from time to time. When was a time you remember praying? Doesn't have to be the last time. But when was,
I mean, because my understanding of prayer was sort of limited to the idea of reaching out to God and asking for something.
Sure. I mean,
I have a very specific memory of, like, I believe my family, we were like locked out of our car, and I prayed because I was probably 8 or 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And like I sat down and I lowered my head into my hands and I prayed that we would figure something out, that like something would happen. And then a few minutes later we like found the keys where they'd fallen out of our pocket, but in the parking lot, like they were close. And I was like, oh, and I felt that rush of gratitude, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I can't take credit for it, but the feeling was there, especially at that age.
Of course.
Where I'm like, I prayed for this and it happened.
Yeah.
Immediately.
It's a good
And
feeling.
it always stuck with me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm more religious, and so it might not be a stretch to say that there's a certain amount of prayer every day. Although I'm pagan, And so what Christian people might consider prayer and what I might consider prayer might be a little different. So again, we just got to be careful with our definitions. You know, I'll talk crap about a lot of religions at the end of the day, but I really hope that no one's too turned off by any particular background here or anything. I really want people to be comfortable from any religious walk of life, because especially at this point in my life, you know, I identify more than ever, and I've got some good Christian friends and met some good priests and stuff that I've conversed with and talked to. But
and my criticisms and problems with Christianity have always been not with Christianity itself,
more with the organized body behind it in certain circumstances,
and with those inside who I consider charlatans, which is a great title within Christianity that I think is underused.
Sure.
that are using Christianity to maintain power and for their personal benefit, you know, to live in a mansion and have a private helicopter, or to abuse children, or to
flat out going on television and say God's going to kill me unless you donate a certain amount of money. I mean, that's happened more than once in the
I've
world
seen
of
so much of that in my life, and that unfortunately taints my view of Christianity as a whole. But I also, like many of my family members, are Christian, and I have some good Christian friends, and they are some of the most loving, generous people that I know.
Mm-hmm. And I think at its core, it's an attempt to create loving, generous people. Mm-hmm. And I really respect that, of course.
And it's more a criticism of power structures and of power maintaining itself, you know.
Sure.
Those in power will do anything they can to maintain their power.
And we also, you know, again, I see this a lot, where I see people that are Christian, or at least, you know, describe themselves as very Christian. And they're some of them don't have any kind of spirituality. And I think no matter what, hands down, that's not good for you. Like, it's not, I think it's a mistake to be strongly religious without spirituality. Mm-hmm. In the sense that your connection to your religion should be spiritual. Like, you should be able to apply that to your life. And I know some pretty lost people out there. I mean, that will fully admit to being lost. And they're like, you know, when things aren't good, I'll go to the scripture. I know a guy that lectured me for, you know, half an hour about the right way to worship Jesus. And I know the dude. Like, he was stoned when he did it. If I asked him what the first commandment was, I know he couldn't give me the answer. And it's like, you got to get in touch with, you've got to be able to project your religion, whatever it is, into your life and live in step with that, with your beliefs. Because if you can't do that in any way, then you've got a bunch of like strong feelings about things that, I'm not a psychiatrist and I don't like to jump onto the pop psychology thing, but it's a good way to end up yelling at people for shortcomings that you're experiencing in your own life.
Oh yeah.
You know, because you're out of touch. Yeah. And fully just giving people in your life crap because you feel that deficit. And I'm hoping that this can give people a way, an outlet into their lives for their religion, if that's what they want. Because I
think that's the real intent. I'll call it practical spirituality. It's a set of, you know, this podcast is our exploration. You know, I would love to see us do specific episodes on religions and then on movements within the religion. Like, if we do an Islam unit, we would go into the history and the schism between Shia and Sunni and the minor groups and Sufism, as well as the Baha'i, which is no longer part of Islam but was originally an offshoot.
Absolutely.
To my understanding, and I could be wrong. Like, I part of, you know, what excites me about this project is the research. Like, both of us are just natural, like, comparative religion nerds.
Yeah. Have been as far back as I can remember.
Yeah, before we met.
And yeah, and fresh out of middle school, early high school, we're talking about Buddhism and, Zoroastrianism or what have you. And it's a driving force in my life. I'm not going to lie. And I do find a lot of like wisdom in other spiritual paths. I mean, like I said, I'm a priest of Wicca, and I do a lot of community stuff. I'm still kind of diving into like the Tantra, for instance, and
I'm very, very compelled by that.
Absolutely.
And I'm at a point where I'm looking into some heightened practice, whether that's becoming a priest or some kind of teacher, but more dedicated, where I've danced around it a lot, but as we've started this project, I feel that urge to go a little deeper. Yeah. And realizing that there are teachers and there's a community here in Seattle.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely nice to have the support and the structure that religion will give you. And I don't think, for me personally, dogma is not a big driving force, and it's hard for me to relate to heavily dogmatic practices personally. I know for other people, they like that. It gives them a stability that they need
the comfort of
for
structure.
comfort. Yeah.
And I have a lot of that. It's funny, like outside of my spiritual life, I am very dependent on structure. Like if I don't have good structure in work and in projects, like I might spin my wheels.
Sure.
But in my spiritual religious practice, like the exploration is what keeps me interested.
Yeah. No, I totally understand.
And I can totally understand, because most of my life I'm like, no, I want strict boundaries and rules and deadlines and expectations. Or I might, well, honestly, what I might end up doing is going and spending my whole day researching some spirituality.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can be pretty black and white when it comes to a lot of things. And I do take comfort in that. The way I live my life is basically research something until I can figure out what's right and wrong. But deep down, I'm always trying to push that very few things are black and white. And very few things are one size fits all. And very few things are 100% this or 100% that. They're all shades of gray. And you got to find your way to live in those. But it's complicated and it's hard, and it's a lifetime effort, and I think spirituality is. I don't want to like fool anyone into thinking this will be the easy way, or that spirituality is something that really comes to you overnight. If you find yourself thinking you've mastered spirituality, especially a few months in, that's a clear sign to step back for a second and be like, whoa. I'm enjoying my successes, but I'm still just got my feet wet, and maybe this isn't as simple as it feels like it is right now. Good advice in a lot of situations, but it happens in spirituality. I mean, I can tell you that I've seen so many people that get into a new belief system or find a new way, or maybe make some breakthrough in their Kabbalistic practice, and all of a sudden it's like they've been immediately... Yeah, it's like I'm in touch with my holy guardian angel, and I can tell anybody how it is. You find them 2 years later, and they're back at square one. And I think that's important to keep in mind, is a certain amount of humility. And even though it might feel like you've got all the answers figured out, how many times has that honestly happened in all our lives? I always like to think, like look at a 19-year-old and they feel like they've got everything figured out, or a 17-year-old.
I was on top of it when I was 17.
Yeah, I knew exactly what I was going to do.
We knew. That was when our friendship really solidified, and we knew how we were going to take over the world at 17. Literally. That's hilarious.
Absolutely. You find somebody at 25 and they're like, man, there's a lot. I've got to get health insurance or something.
Yeah.
I don't even know how that works. I'm supposed to get a job.
Where'd all this debt come from?
Absolutely, yeah. I applied for this job today, and I need it because I need experience. But they told me I can't have it until I have more experience. Like, figure that out.
Yeah, and that's only gotten worse.
Exactly. That's called navigating real life.
Yeah.
And it always rears its ugly head. And it will in spirituality, just like anything else. I mean, there'll be times where feel like you've got a firm handle on things, and then maybe you go through a divorce, or maybe something tragic happens in your life, and all of a sudden you feel like you don't have any idea what you're doing.
Or you just eat something you're allergic to and feel sick.
Sure, absolutely. End up in bed for a week.
Yeah, I just threw my neck out.
Yeah.
Possibly because of my daily rites. Who knows? Who could say?
Yep. And that's the thing. Again, that's where this idea of the practice comes in. Doing
practice
something
is the
regularly.
best word for it.
Yeah.
It is always a practice till the day you die.
It's something that you do. It's not something that you sit on the couch and figure out. It's something that you physically do. You commit to, and you put the work in. And that's where you get benefits, because, ideas come and go, and belief systems come and go. Some you carry with you forever. Some fall off, and you don't even know when.
And we do have epiphanies throughout our lives, And some of them are very profound. And some of them may change the course of your life forever. Some of them may be fleeting. They might feel like a grand spiritual experience. And a few weeks later, your perspective changes. And it always will. We're aging, our relationships are changing. We still inhabit this physical body, so our spirituality cannot overcome that.
I've got a whole, laundry list of flaws that I'm still working out. The problem is there's probably more I don't know about than do know about.
It's like our understanding of the universe. The more we learn, the more we realize we don't know. Yeah. So as our knowledge expands, the gap in our knowledge expands twice as fast.
Absolutely. So the shadow work never quite catches up, But that doesn't matter, because working forward
it's worth it.
Does get you further, slowly but surely. And it's our hope that this practice will do the same in people's lives, because I really think, again, when it gets down to it, I think almost anybody can benefit from a spiritual practice. Not everybody needs it, maybe, but there's probably some level of benefit to everyone, and that's really where we're going to go with a lot of this.
We are building a spirituality.
Yes. Regardless of your religion, and if you want to jump on the train and take a ride, then, it's free. You're getting what you paid for. Hopefully more.
But if you want to support us,
absolutely,
we'll figure that out eventually.
Yeah, we'll have some answers further down the road. For now, this is just something that, honestly, I think we can both say we just feel called to do. Mm-hmm. We're doing it for ourselves, sure, but in this crazy time of division and uncertainty, I think everybody can use it, and it costs me very little to share this with other people. If they get anything out of it, it'll be worth it. And I think spirituality and religion's given me a lot, and has a lot more I hope it can give, and I'm looking forward to that. We're seekers when it comes down to it. Yeah, we're just looking.
We believe our audience is, our intended audience is seekers as well. We're never satisfied with ourselves. We're never satisfied with the answers we've found. We always looking for more, and it doesn't always have to be deep.
No.
But
if you've ever stayed up
your life
late into the night wondering what it all means, or you get that nagging feeling in the back of your mind that all this is somehow related, but you're not quite sure how.
Yeah, how do you draw the lines? When you put up all your chalkboards and your whiteboards in your apartment, and you're drawing strings from one thing to the other, and you've got your pictures of Jesus and your pictures of Buddha and your pictures of a yogi, and you're like, how is it all? There's something there. I can feel it.
Yeah,
we all can. It's this deep knowledge within our beings.
Absolutely. And that's driven us since we were young teenagers. And we have some answers, I think. I like to think. We have a lot of questions.
I would say.
Sure, certainly. We have more questions than ever. Certainly. But if you relate in any way to that, then this is for you, you know? And we won't tell you what's right or wrong, but we'll tell you the answers that we found and how we got there and try to show our work as best as we can.
And we hope to be building a community.
Yeah.
You know, we want, as seekers, we aren't claiming, you know, to be the ones with all the answers.
No.
And that's why I will call myself a seeker. I will call my audience seekers as long as this podcast lasts.
Yeah.
Because it's not about the destination. It really is. Like, it's the journey. Your life is a journey. You know, if you're obsessed with the destination, then all you're thinking about is the day you die.
And we've seen how that goes time and time again.
All right. Well,
thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah. It's great to kind of share this, and hopefully it'll be one of these episodes that creates a foundation for what we're trying to do moving forward. So take care, everyone. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you again. The music